Hello, welcome
Hi.
everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. It's the top of the hour, 12 Eastern on the East Coast. Thank you all for joining. We'll just wait another couple seconds for some people to enter. But thank you all for taking time out of your day today to come and learn about sustainable apparel and all the amazing things that our partner SanMar is doing. Really grateful that you guys have all joined us today. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to Threads of Change, where we will be exploring sustainable apparel with SanMar. My name is Joseph Sommer. I am the founder and CEO of Whitestone, and I am so jazzed to talk about this topic today. And what we'll be going over today, we'll be looking at the basics of sustainable apparel. We will be really looking into what differentiates a sustainable shirt, understanding sustainabilities. We're going to be demystifying certifications and really giving you a good understanding for what to look for when you are evaluating a garment. We're going to talk about the role of vertical integration. Our partner today has really mastered vertical integration in Honduras, and I'm excited for you to learn a little bit about what they are doing on the ground there. And then we're going to be sharing smart sourcing tips, giving you kind of a tool set for asking essential questions. And we hope you leave with kind of a really strong understanding of the fabrics that make the shirt and just how to go about sourcing more sustainably. So today I am really, I'm just so grateful to have Emily Gigot on the call. She is the Director of Sustainability for SanMar. And if you don't know SanMar, SanMar is the largest apparel wholesaler in our industry. Whitestone wouldn't be able to do what we do without SanMar. SanMar is a family owned company founded in 1971 that supplies blank apparel and accessories to companies just like Whitestone. They are the engine behind many of the brands that we rely on, from brands you're familiar with like Port Authority, District, Sport Tech, to premium retail partnerships with Nike, Carhartt, the North Face, and Travis Matthew. SanMar boasts 8 national distribution centers and moves millions of pieces of apparel each and every week, playing a massive role in the corporate wholesale apparel market. And in the past few years, they've become the most influential voice in pushing sustainability forward in our space. They've invested in recycling fibers, water reduction manufacturing, circularity pilots, and supply chain transparency at scale. Few companies in our industry can match. I am grateful to have Emily, their Director of Sustainability, on with us today. Thank you so much for joining and talking about this topic with us.
Oh, thank you, Joseph, so much. That was such a nice intro. And I'm so pleased to be here to talk about sustainable apparel and all the work that SanMar is doing in that space. And just really grateful for everybody on the call for taking the time out of your busy days to be here and join this conversation. I do want it to be a conversation. We're leaving time for questions at the end. I'm really happy to answer any. And um, you know, sustainability for me is something that's been a multi-year, sort of maybe even a multi-decade journey, because when I think back to kind of my early interests in this space, I used to spend my allowance money, giving money to the World Wildlife Fund and National Arbor Day Foundation, and have I'm going to age myself here, but I have responses from Reagan and Bush Senior for letters I wrote to the president about saving this forest or whatnot. And so it started at an early age. But it definitely was like a winding road for me to get where I am today. I started my career in Los Angeles in the retail apparel sector, not doing anything related to sustainability. Had the privilege of working in small companies, so got to wear lots of hats, got to see kind of the full apparel development process. Would travel to trade shows. When we weren't in the selling season, I was back in the office helping with production, getting ready, for the next season's offerings. So got to see, that kind of end-to-end process of how an apparel piece gets made and out into the market. And after several years in LA, decided to take a little bit of a career break. It was supposed to only be 6 months. It lasted 5 years. But I call it my quarter life crisis that brought me to Asia. I lived in Thailand for several years, first in a community development role, and then teaching English and just soaking up another culture, and really enjoyed my time there. It was a very, very formative time, but ultimately decided I wanted to come back to the US, be close to family, be able to come back to my roots in apparel. And so, studied sustainable business at a program that was at the time the only program that was, bridging business and sustainability in a formal way. And I got the opportunity to the sustainable apparel conversation had kind of kicked off since I'd been out of the country. And it was this wonderful light bulb of saying, like, wow, I can come back into the business sector. I can draw on my roots in apparel, and I can continue this drive of wanting to bring good into the world. And after a spell consulting, I found my way to SanMar, and have been here for just about a little over 9 years, just past my milestone in October. And it's been a wonderful journey here. I started more focused in social compliance, was sort of my initial role at SanMar. And then, kind of quickly realized we had an opportunity to have a more intentional focus on our environmental footprint and say more about what we were doing, right? Joseph, you mentioned we're a family-owned company. Our owners are very humble, right? And it was, when I came, it was this sort of interesting push-pull of like, well, people want to know about what we're doing, but kind of that not wanting to beat our chest about it. So it's been this wonderful dance of, how do we share and share these stories while also stay focused on making an impact and doing the right thing.
Well, I think you've
So,
learned to tell the story well, and so much
I'm going to talk a little bit today.
inspired an industry to follow suit.
Oh, well, thank you. It's, that's really, when we talk about sustainability, it's been such an interesting journey of, I think when I first kind of started in the field almost 15 years ago, it was kind of an us or them vibe, right? Of like, there were, the brands that were doing it and the companies that weren't. And now it's been such a joy to see that this has grown to be something that everybody's talking about. You might be at different parts in your journey, but that, we're all working towards this common goal and common good. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Well,
So
talk
happy
to
to
us.
dive in.
Yes, let's dive in and start learning.
Great. So, when we talk about sustainability, and feel free to go to the next slide, we are looking at, you know, I often get the question, I should say, of, what's sustainable? Show me the sustainable one. And, I give the very frustrating answer of it depends. Right? I know it's one of those, you're in a hot RFP process, or you just want the answer, right? And it really depends on, what it is that you're looking for and what we're talking about within the product's life cycle. So, these are two shirts. One is our PC01, one is our PC43. And for both of them, in any apparel product, these impacts will occur throughout the product life cycle. And this is only like the short snapshot of raw material to the final decorated product. There's even more opportunity to impact the footprint of a product, after it goes out into the world, how you dispose of it. But for the purpose of our conversation today, I'm going to focus on kind of that upstream supply chain. And, for each of those products, there are impacts at every stage of the supply chain. It's in the materials you choose, it's how the product is produced, it's how it's decorated, how it gets out into the world. And even not mentioned here is how it moves, right? The logistics of distribution footprint. And so I think that's something that we have to hold when we talk about like what is sustainable. And sustainability, when we talk about what the definition means, it is oftentimes defined using the definition of sustainable development that was developed in the late 80s, right? Which, and this is a light paraphrase, but it's the idea that we are, making choices today that meet our needs while also making sure that future generations can thrive. I a lot of times I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I kind of use that as a guiding light of like, what are we doing today to make sure that she will have the same, if not more, opportunities to thrive in her future and be able to lead a good life, and for grandkids and all of that. So it's thinking about the future in our today decisions. It
Love that.
oftentimes is associated with environment, but it really does cover these three pillars, right? It's it is, of course, the environment, it's the materials we choose, it's how we're managing our energy and our waste, but it's also people, it's our impact on society. Are we ensuring that there are good working conditions where we are doing business? Are we protecting human rights? How are we contributing to our local communities where we operate? And it also expands to how we just operate as a business, right? Do we have a solid economic performance to ensure that we're a good employer? Do we have good practices in place? Are we operating ethically? All of that falls under the broad sustainability banner. So when asked the question of like which t-shirt is more sustainable, this is where it gets tricky, right? Is it's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can look at sustainability. So kind of going back to that product life cycle, you know, when as we're going through that, there are lots of different places where impacts occur. And, if we go to the next one where I could pick out where each of these impacts are happening, but it is happening across the whole life cycle of the product. So foundationally, at the bottom here, I'm going to go kind of bottom to top here. The real foundation of this work is the social side of things, right? Is making sure that at every point in the supply chain, people are protected. And that at this point, I would say in like kind of the general sustainability journey, like that is so foundational to everything we do. And so really starting there and making sure that there are strong practices in place at, kind of every step. Once you have that determined, then we can talk about, what are these different levers we can pull to make the product more sustainable or kind of answer that question. And at one point it's the materials, right? It is, can we bring in some recycled content to reduce the overall footprint of the product? Can we look for, cotton that is sourced responsibly? If we're looking at a man-made cellulosic fiber like rayon or viscose or modal, right? How do we make sure that those are coming from forests that are responsibly managed? So it's looking at like the pure, what you see on that care and content label, what the product's made of. Those are some choices we can make to affect the overall impact of the product. And then it goes into, well, how is the product made? Right? For most apparel products, it's going to go from raw material, it'll get spun into yarn, made into fabric, cut into a garment, and decorated. And so those are a lot of actors that you can engage with to ensure that, those facilities individually are being managed in a way that is prioritizing social compliance, but also managing the environmental impacts effectively. And it's kind of a mix of, there are the practices there, but then there are also some facilities that kind of take that next step to go after a certification or things like that that can demonstrate that work. And we'll talk a little bit more about certifications later. But that's really at the facility level, in the way that decisions made at each of those steps can also impact the sustainability of a product. And then finally, there are those company level programs. So who is the brand or the brand owner, the company that's responsible for developing and designing that product? What programs do they have in place that look at either their practices in the supply chain, that look at their practices at their own offices, that look at kind of general oversight over all of these programs? So taking all of those into account for are ways that we can talk about, whether or not a shirt is sustainable or an apparel piece is sustainable. So going back to our two shirts. So both of these shirts are made by SanMar. We are a Fair Labor Association accredited brand, and that puts us in, a very small group of companies that have gone through the accreditation process, which means that not only is the Fair Labor Association doing random monitoring at our factories, they also come to SanMar. They talk with our ownership, they talk with our executive leadership, they talk with our sourcing and compliance teams to make sure that our practices around responsible sourcing are embedded in all departments. It's not just kind of siloed over here. It is something that is kind of truly operationalized in how we do business with our suppliers. Part of those practices that we have implemented are social compliance audits at every single one of our factories. We also require all of our factories to complete the HIG facility environmental module, which is an assessment for facilities to measure their environmental footprint. Both of these shirts undergo both of those types of assessments. They're both made at factories that are powered by renewable energy. Both are at factories that are certified to OEKO-TEX Standard 100, which is a certification that guarantees or certifies that no harmful substances in terms of chemistry are used. One of them is made with virgin US cotton, which has its own sustainability story to tell, right? There's a lot of focus within the US cotton industry right now they've set their own sustainability goals. They are striving to improve soil health, working on programs to sequester carbon in the soil. So that has its own sustainability story. The other is made from 100% recycled content that is coming from our own manufacturing processes. So which one is more sustainable?
I think, Emily, what I want to call out when looking at this slide, and I think this helps our customers kind of demystify sustainability in a way, in that they're both made from recycled content or U.S. cotton that is part of the Fair Labor Association. I think what I jumps out to me is that it's so much more about the business and the company that's making the product than the product itself. And this is something we've talked about a lot at Whitestone, especially as we've created our tiered supplier framework and throughout other webinars that we've had, that it's so important to look at the business that's making the product and not so much the product itself. While that is so important, we see this, especially so much in greenwashing, that one product, they might be the same product, but they're saying they're made from recycled content. But one of those pieces might not be made from a company that's using renewable energy, might not be made from a company that is taking care of its workers, or that's being audited for social compliance. They might be using harmful chemicals. And so what I really love about this is how you're talking so much about the efforts that SanMar is doing holistically. And I think that really is something that I would encourage our customers and really everyone to ask about, like just understanding the source and where it's coming from, which is, I think, just as important, or if not more important than the product itself. So this was so awesome to learn and see, and for you to share.
Yeah, thank you for that call out, because I think that really, it really makes a lot of sense of, where we're at right now is, and I'll say it again, like, I know there's that drive of wanting, like, just which one is it? Which one is better? And that's our brains, right? We want those binary answers. But, as we start to talk about sustainability, right, it is this broad definition, and it's so important to be specific, right? As you're thinking about, what is the right product to present, what's the right fit. I would also, in addition to looking at like the holistic picture of the company that's making it, it's also asking those questions of, what is it that you care about? What is it that you are trying to, you want sustainable. Okay. What does that mean to you? What are you trying to communicate? What are you trying to achieve through that sustainable product? And I think that's where the conversation gets really rich and really interesting, because it allows you to have a conversation around goals. It allows you to have a conversation around values, and it takes it out of that transactional, like, here's a recycled content t-shirt. It's how can this product help you tell the story of your brand in a way that feels really aligned and that feels really meaningful. And it also puts us in a position to be, have it feel more genuine and more credible because we're being specific. Like, I care about a product that has recycled content because we're really focused on waste reduction, and you can make that connection of how this product helps that. We have carbon emissions goals. We want to be able to demonstrate that this product is helping us reach it because you can show that it has a lower carbon footprint, right? Like, that is such a richer conversation than like, here's a sustainable product. So I think that's one of the things as we talk about like the basics of sustainable apparel. It's not basic, it's pretty complex, but if we can be specific, then it can bring us into a conversation that is, I think, really meaningful and helps make those connections.
I couldn't agree more. And also, when I think of sustainable apparel, I always think of soft fabric and quality fabric. Every sustainable piece of apparel that I've ever owned just naturally rises to the top of my drawer. And when I think about sustainability in products, for me, it always is, what am I going to use again and again and again? And something that I'll value and keep, which I think is equally tied to the conversation, because we don't want to just be creating more. We want to be creating things that tie people to people's brands, people that they'll create something and they'll covet it. And again, it'll
Yes.
get used and used and used.
I mean, that's a whole, you're speaking my language there, Joseph, because that's a whole other part of the sustainability conversation is like the longevity of a product. And if it's something that someone wants to keep in their closet and wear over and over again, like, that is its own sustainable attribute. So that's a really great call out. Well, I want to talk a little bit about certifications now because, we're talking about being specific. We're talking about, helping someone identify like what's important to them, what's going to roll up into their goals, what's going to have a brand message that's aligned. And certifications are one way that we can help do that and help kind of support that specificity. So, I'm kind of drawing back on the supply chain product lifecycle graphic again, but it is, there are ways, just as there's impacts at every level of the supply chain, there are certifications at every level of the supply chain or programming that you can activate or that you can seek out. So SanMar, we have, lots of different programs that we work with, lots of different organizations that we partner with, because we really believe that, like, we can't act alone in any of this, right? We need to collaborate. We need to come together as industry and at these kind of like broader levels to really make an impact. We also know that we're not the experts, so we rely on other people to kind of come in, just as I mentioned with Fair Labor Association, to look at us, like, what can we do differently? What can we do better? Hold us accountable. And so I wanted to walk through a couple of the certifications that we're utilizing, and programs, I should say, that we're utilizing. So starting at the raw material, we work with a program called the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. That is one that is, really focused on being able to trace and tell the story of U.S. cotton, and being able to validate that that's happening at every stage of the supply chain. We also, when we work with recycled content and organic content, that is something that we also utilize to make sure that we feel good about making the claim, that anyone who's talking about the product can feel good about making the claim. I also mentioned that within the manufacturing sector, there are, several audits and assessments and programs that we use throughout that part of our supply chain to make sure that, we feel good about the environmental performance of a factory. We feel good about their management of working conditions and health and safety. We feel good about their chemical usage. And then the last piece is kind of on the company side, and even sort of like just like the full product life cycle side. Like I mentioned, we're part of Fair Labor Association. We're also a Blue Sign System partner, and that helps us look at our overall business impact as it relates to sustainability and chemistry. And the last one I would highlight is, we work with an organization called Climbco that is a certifying body. They have a Climbco product certified as part of our C-Free program that we use in our C-Free program, which looks at, how can we demonstrate that we have made a reduction in our carbon footprint and then have gone out and invested in offsets to demonstrate that carbon reduction of the products. So I just, gave you a whole laundry list of certifications and assessments and audits. But I will walk it back a little bit and we can talk about, how those things are, what's different about them, what's special about them, how we can define them. So, just some things to remember, right? Standards, those are kind of the rules of the road, the criteria that are set, the guidelines, and then certifications we look at to really make sure that those standards have been followed. So a great example for recycled content. There is a recycled content standard that says, how do we define what's allowable under the definition of recycled content? How do we define the processes that need to be followed? And then a certification is validating that that is happening, whether it's for a product or a process or an organization. It's validated by an assessment or an audit. And that is the act of a third party going into a facility, looking at a product, looking at their processes, what have you, and making sure that the standards are followed. Accreditation is a little different in that it's looking at, making sure that a company or an organization or a program can reliably be in compliance with this particular standard, can be relied on to implement the standards consistently. And sort of put in another way, right? It kind of like it starts with the standard. The certification tells us that the criteria of that standard have been met. The assessments and audits, while they can be also happen outside of a certification process, like that's the how of the certification. And then accreditation is sort of this idea that is looking at, holistically, can an organization or an individual, are they implementing it on the day to day? And so this is sort of the toolbox that we use. I mentioned these certificates earlier. And, for us, this, has been a really great set of certifications that we feel like is, holistic. It starts at the raw material. It goes all the way through, how we assess ourselves. EcoVadis, I didn't mention earlier, that's a sustainability assessment that looks at just kind of overall practices of an organization and is utilized to kind of be able to apples be able to assess suppliers in a supply chain. But lots of different things to be looking at. And again, it goes back to that, like, being specific, right? What is it that is important to you or the end user or the person who's going to ultimately receive a product? Is it, some combination of things? Is one thing more important to them or the other? And, for us, it's really looking at, across all of our brands, that these are the kind of the tools that we're using to make sure that, we're delivering on our sustainability promise.
This is a lot, and I have to imagine that all of this falls up to you in your role as director of sustainability. I'm curious, how you approach all of this annually. Like, what has been your process to improve each of these, or is there shared? Are they all shared equally? I'm curious to kind of learn your process for evaluating, and if there are any on the horizon that you see being added to your sustainability toolbox.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say I can't take full credit for all of this, right? It's a team effort. We've got a great team of people in SanMar. Starting within our compliance team, right? We have a whole group that's focused specifically on factory monitoring, day in, day out, they are working with our supply chain partners, making sure that we are doing the absolute best that we can to protect workers, make sure we're in good working conditions and good standing there. We also have a really strong product safety team that's looking at our products, making sure we're doing everything we can to deliver on our safety promise. And then on the sustainability side and traceability is sort of a burgeoning area for us as well. It's how can we make sure that we are benchmarking against the absolute best? Because we know that, our products end up everywhere. They end up in all sorts of industries. They end up in, Fortune 500. They are in, we need to be able to deliver product that's going to meet the highest standard. And that's really where we're focused on a day in, day out is, how do we make sure that we have good coverage so that we're hitting on all of these different areas, whether it's materials impact or manufacturing or whatnot, but also that we're going deep enough that we can feel really confident in our programming and in our supply chain and in our products. So it's definitely a mix, and it's a team effort for sure, because one of the things that's crucial here is our strong relationship with our product development and sourcing organization and those teams, right? Because we can't successfully implement these programs if we are not fully integrated with the teams that are building the product. And so I think that's one of the other really high points of our program is that, that dialogue that goes back and forth, that partnership, both with them and then also with our suppliers, so that we're all in this together, and it's more relational and less transactional, and it comes through in all of the brands that we offer.
And I was just thinking about the brands you offer and having seen them be produced firsthand myself in Honduras. Speak a little bit about these brands and kind of the role vertical integration plays to creating leading apparel brands in our space.
Yeah, and so that's, I think, for us, the role of our supplier relationships is crucial. It's something that has been, one of the things that I think is, if not most special about SanMar, it's something that is kind of ingrained in me through my time here, is the role and the kind of like the pedestal we place relationships on. We talk about business as personal. We talk about, we hear the stories of SanMar from, when Marty launched the company all the way through Jeremy being in leadership, running the company. It's like, it's all about these relationships. It's all about, that personal touch, and that extends to our supply chain partners. And, the story we're going to share here, Brianna, from our sales team visited and put together this amazing video. And so we want to share a little bit, you get a rest from me and just get to see it firsthand of how special this place is.
I love that Brianna made that.
I
And
know. It's
it stands out to me. There's kind of three things that I pick up on. The first is the largest solar power system in Latin America. I think that just speaks to the environmental impact that you have. And then uh, the second is how you help people provide pathways to home ownership in a gated community. I've seen that firsthand. It's being developed and continued to scale each and every day. And then the third thing, having toured a lot of factories, I mean, this is the cleanest factory I've ever been on. I mean, it's incredibly clean. It's so well operated, and just the sheer scale and volume of it is just impeccable.
yeah, I mean, it's one of the real highlights of the work that I get to do is working with partners like this. We've been working with this particular supply chain partner for over a decade. Um, what I have seen demonstrated is just an absolute pioneering spirit in energy, the commitment to renewable energy, but not mentioned there. Also, they have a biogas facility. There are other forms of renewable energy that they are using to power their soap plants and their textile mills. It goes all the way through that supply chain, and the facilities there. And then that's just on the outside of the building and how it's powered. When you walk through it and you see the investments they've made in experimentation and in kind of like the best in class latest technology around the machinery that's used through the production process to save water, save on chemistry, save on energy use, just in how the manufacturing facility operates and the production line, I should say, that has always been, I feel like, core to who they are. And on top of that, then you have the commitment to the people who work there. So the programming they have, to make sure that this is a really great place to work, that people want to stay, that there are all these different programs that are offered to employees, and just that real like care that they take. Um, and then you look at the community. So what you said, Joseph, right? Like, what factory creates an affordable housing program near where they live, right? Like, there's just this demonstration of like a true understanding of what it means to be a good community partner. And so whether it's the housing project that they've developed in partnership with the local government, the investments they've made in other social programs that they help to operate, whether it's schools or orphanages, different programming like that. It's just really a pleasure to be able to work with them, and it's resulted in incredible impact, right? On the environmental side alone, like, we're estimating annually it's like 85,000 tons of avoided emissions because of their investments of renewable energy, 80,000 gallons of water avoided because of their investment in efficient machinery. And so, just really great impacts. This particular supplier, it's the majority of our port and company product district as well. So like when you see those brands, you can know that they are part of making a difference in this community in Honduras.
It's world class in absolutely every way.
Thank you.
So, how does this all tie back to customers? I think, the thought behind having this webinar is that apparel is it's 35% of our business. It's the largest product category. Um, we want to really share this knowledge with all our customers so that when they see Port and Company or district shirts being offered, they feel connected to the story. Um, but how can they leave here with kind of some smart sourcing tips to help better make decisions?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, what we talked about at the top of the hour of, that specificity, right? You will get the question, like, what's my sustainable option? Or can you show me the sustainable option? And, coming back to that idea of like, it's not one size fits all, that word in and of itself does not have a narrow definition. It has a very broad definition. And so that's where I think the fun starts. That's where the conversation gets more interesting and where you can add a lot of value in those conversations around, like what does the user of the product care about? Whether it's the company buying it for their employees, or are we trying to like really have a message to that employee who's going to wear the shirt, or the person receiving the shirt, I should say, right? That can influence, what you might want to focus on. Is it something that's going to be communicated on product, something that, you can see the organic cotton or you can see the recycled content written on the care and content label? Or is it something that is a story that doesn't necessarily need to be told on the product, but that you want to be able to demonstrate that, this product came from a supplier that, is doing the wonderful things like what we're doing in Honduras. So it's like being able to take it from a transactional conversation to something that is, more relational, that is kind of more in depth, where you can show up as like a thought partner and be able to kind of suss out like what is going to support your goals. The other piece I would say when you're sourcing sustainable apparel is know your suppliers, right? Know these stories. However we can support in that way, we're here for it. But it's like understanding like who does what well, whether it's across all of your product offerings. What are those things that are that you can offer and that you can kind of help to add that richness to the story, so that you have a menu of these sustainable attributes, so that you can go from it being kind of this blanket, sustainable umbrella, to things, to kind of these more discrete choices of, this one has a water reduction story, this one has a carbon reduction story, this one is a circular story, so there's something a little bit more kind of more nuanced there, and I think adds kind of value to the conversation. And then the last thing I would say is, that old adage of trust but verify, right? There's lots of claims thrown around. There's lots of, kind of big statements made. And I think it's really important in this moment to make sure, because there's a lot of attention being placed on sustainability and sustainability claims. You mentioned greenwashing before, right? It's like, how can we make sure that when we're talking about these things, we have done our homework to make sure we feel good about telling the story. But then also, how can we have all that kind of documentation or things we expect, anticipate what those follow-up questions are going to be, so that we can be prepared to delight somebody? Because you never want to have that situation where we're kind of talking about sustainability and then someone asks a follow-up question and you're kind of like, let me get back to you. Right. So being able to kind of like have all that ready to go, so that it's going back to that, like becoming a trusted thought partner. And that's really what we aim to be.
I love that. Every product has a story, and having the wherewithal to tell that story, I think, is critical and so
Mm,
important.
yep, absolutely.
So, would love to hear if anyone has any questions for Emily or myself. This was so wonderful, and I'm in love with SanMar. They've been probably our number one vendor since Whitestone was started in 2013, and I'm just so grateful for the partnership. And for those that don't know, Whitestone took 13 of our team members, all those that are on the CSR committee, in March down to Honduras, where we toured their vertically integrated factory and saw, I think it was probably 6 or 7 different facilities. It was just spectacular, and I'm really grateful, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hmm,
Anyone have
thank
any
you.
questions?
I see a few coming through. Oh, here we go. Great. So many certifications. If we could only focus on one or two, what would I recommend? Great question. So I would say, I really believe that the kind of social compliance element of sustainability is foundational, right? So, for sure, start there. Make sure that whether it's a certification or an accreditation or another, way a company is able to demonstrate to you that they're doing their work, they're doing their due diligence in their supply chain, that'd be, number one. And then on the next one, it goes back to that, like, what's important to you? I think that becomes, what is the story that you want to tell? What is the story how do you want to position yourself as, what your offering is? So is it a kind of circularity, recycled content story, then focus on a recycled content certification? Is it a demonstration of commitment to environmental principles? Then maybe it's the HIG facility environmental module, and you're making sure that factories have that. Or maybe it's a chemistry certification, or one that is kind of like a holistic environmental factory certification. I would really encourage you to think about, what is that angle that you would like to take, and what have you decided is sort of most important to you, and have that be your number two.
I'm curious on that. Whitestone is EcoVadis certified, and I know SanMar is as well. We are considering B Corp. I think that's something we're going to prioritize investing time to really look into and evaluate. I'm curious, does SanMar ever consider B Corp, or how do you think about the comparison between, or the differences between B Corp and EcoVadis?
Yeah, so definitely different. B Corp falls in the certification bucket, right? Where they are, calling themselves B Corp certified. So they have their B Corp standard, and then the certification is looking at, whether or not a company is meeting that standard. That I think has a lot of value, in the sense that, that truly is a certification. B Corp has kind of given a seal of approval. And if that is something that is meaningful to kind of your audience, your clients, then that is a really powerful way to go. Great organization, great, very strong holistic standard that they've developed. EcoVadis is also a very strong program, tons of adoption globally, right? Lots of different companies, lots of different industries are using it. It's an assessment. So it is, asking a set of questions, and whether or not how you place on it is the kind of the output on that. So they can be used somewhat differently. In both cases, they're a way to assess whether a company has at least looked at themselves, right? Like done their homework, and kind of like, sat down and assessed all of their programs, but the output is different. So I think, SanMar's looked at B Corp. We haven't decided to pursue it up until now, but I think it goes back to, do you want to be able to have that sort of like stamp of approval from an organization like B Corp? Or on the EcoVadis side, do you want to be able to demonstrate they have like kind of ranked medals, kind of more of like a progress score,
Yeah.
or do you want to communicate a score? So
I think one thing you said that stood out to me, which is maybe why we gravitated more to EcoVadis, was the word global. When I think of EcoVadis, I definitely think of it as a global assessment, where B Lab and B Corp, at least from what I've seen, feels a little bit North America and maybe hasn't reached the more global audience. Do you think that's fair to say, or do you see B Corp kind of more as a global certification now too?
I mean, I think if we look at where they each started, right? B Lab is US based. EcoVadis, if I'm not mistaken, was started in France. So there's just already kind of uh, you know, EcoVadis has made it over here. I don't know to what extent B Corp has made it over there or other places, right? But definitely, if you're serving, say, like the European market, I think EcoVadis has much more name recognition at this point. Whereas I think B Corp is associated with, you know, their early adopters were these brands that you associate with sustainability. So it's kind of like a little bit of a vibe check almost. Like it's a kind of a not so professional way to say it. It's sort of like, what do you feel like resonates with your brand
Yeah,
more, right? So
cool.
both
Well,
great
thank.
programs.
I think we have another question.
We do. So, what sustainable products are most realistic for tight timelines? I could say like on a general rule, and then on a more specific to SanMar. Generally, right, it really depends on the company. Um, if they are, for some of those certifications, say that if you are looking for a company that, or a product that's coming from a company that's B Corp certified, for instance, that's a very long timeline for that to be done. So you'd have to prioritize somebody who already has it to be able to get a product from them that would be able to be associated with that certification. For things in the supply chain, quite often those shouldn't sustainability shouldn't impact timelines necessarily because the development of the product can go out. You seek out the suppliers that are already carrying that certification. It goes back to that question of like who is making the product, and if you pursue and put that as part of a requirement, we're looking for product that carries the certification, then that kind of immediately surfaces certain supply chain partners that are going to be able to fill that requirement. For SanMar, our whole business model is built on deep inventory. So, there's no difference between a sustainable product versus a product that doesn't, that we don't tout as sustainable. The goal is to still have the same level of inventory to service the need.
And I also think with tight timelines too, regional sourcing is key. It
Mm,
doesn't make sense to put something on a plane to ship from California to New York just because it's being marketed as sustainable when the carbon journey from LA to New York is much higher than putting it on a truck and going from New Jersey to New York. And that's what I love about SanMar, and having 8 regional distribution centers for us to pull from really makes it easy to think about um, how to get product to our customers in an environmentally friendly transportation way too.
yep, absolutely. Yeah. Air shipping can kind of destroy a sustainability story pretty quickly. So,
Totally.
to the best of our, and that plays into it, right? SanMar, one of the organizations that SanMar is a part of is called Better Buying. And the whole purpose of it is to identify how buying practices impact a factory's ability to honor their commitments to working conditions and things like that. And it's that idea that like SanMar, we have a role to play, right? If we are, making last minute changes and not adjusting the delivery, if we are, not, acting with good intention as a buyer, that can impact the factory's ability um, to operate effectively. And so wherever possible, trying to give good forecasts. And to your point, Joseph, that's where I think our inventory model really serves us, is that we can make sure we have things so that we can help meet those tight timelines when needed, because we've already done the work and we're holding the product ready to deliver.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I didn't see any other questions. If anyone has, please feel free to ask. But I just want to say thank you so much again, Emily. This was so wonderful. And I'm, again, just so grateful for the partnership with SanMar and your willingness to come on and speak to our customers and share a little bit about the journey and what goes into making a t-shirt and a piece of apparel sustainable. There are ways that you can connect with us here. Please connect with Emily on LinkedIn and myself as well. But again, just thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. I just really, pleased to be here and spend the time with you.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. We hope you learned something and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Have a great day. Thanks.